John.
How did you and Kathy get interested in doing this? I mean, I know that's a long question, probably has a long answer.
No problem.
Was there a particular incident or,
You mean bird watching or
and
photography?
Yeah.
Well, both of us have been interested in nature all our lives. I grew up on a farm, so nature was just part of my life, and I was taught about nature by my grandfather. So I've been interested in birds all my life. And then I didn't know that people actively went out and looked at birds for fun until I was out of college. But so I've been very active in that. Kathy, she has a wonderful story. I should give her the microphone and let her tell the story, because I can't tell it as well as you do.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a giraffe. But when I found out you couldn't be a giraffe, I decided I wanted to be a nature photographer, because I lived in a small town in eastern New Mexico where we got this thing called cable TV. And we got TV for 4 hours a day, but the other channel that we could get was PBS out of Boston on cable. And so I watched all those animal shows, and I just thought everybody went to Africa and photographed animals. That was what I thought you did, because I watched all those Elsa the Lion and all that stuff. So I decided I wanted to be a nature photographer when I was a small child. But went to college, studied management, came out with a management degree, and then decided I wanted to do it for real. So I left my corporate career 20 years ago to be a nature photographer.
Okay, answer?
Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
Question, do you think global warming will cause erratic...
Can you picture? I can't quite hear. Huh?
Do you think global warming is going to start causing erratic migration patterns in birds and maybe cause them to stop indicating the change of the seasons?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In the end, the quick answer is yes. What global warming is doing is it's changing the vegetation, and it's changing the flourishing of insects dependent on the vegetation. And many of these songbirds depend on the insects. It also changes the forest ecosystem, especially in the conifer forest in northern Canada. And those forests are being replaced by deciduous forests, like oaks, things like that. Deciduous trees meaning their leaves fall off, So as the landscape changes, as the habitat changes as a result of the warming of the earth, then two things are happening. One is that birds are beginning to sense the flowering of plants, the leafing of the trees earlier. Every year it gets a little earlier. So yes, they're beginning their migration earlier. And yes, they'll begin their southbound migration earlier because they're sensing that habitat's changing. The other thing that's happening is the food resources. In some cases, their food resources are disappearing. Remember the red knot I showed you? Its food resources are disappearing. What will it do? One of the things it could do is it could switch its diet to insects. And there is evidence, because we do have a wintering population, small, very small, wintering population of red knots. And the Laguna Atascosa area of the Laguna Madre area of South Texas, very small population. These birds don't migrate up the coast. They migrate up through the Central Plains and they feed on insects. And they finally get to the top of the world to breed. So that might be hope for that bird. But what you're seeing, if that happens, what you're seeing is evolution in action. So with some birds, it may be that they will evolve into a different kind of species that's dependent on land masses with insects as opposed to coastal areas with crustaceans and things like that. Does that answer your question? Yeah, so all these birds are responding. We don't know whether or not all of them will respond, but it looks like red knots might. Okay. Other question? Yeah.
Yes, we have this beautiful lowlands trail behind the campus that goes to the Cypress Swamp.
I know it well.
Special birds we might see back there, or birds that are near extinction that we might look for back there.
Every bird I put on the screen. Every one of the birds I put on the program. I put those birds up deliberately because there's not a single bird, well, with the exception of the brown pelican. You're not going to see a brown pelican up here. But all the birds you see are going to be there because you are in a really wetland habitat. And as you walk that trail, you get closer to the plain, to the river floodplains, and all the birds that tell us what kind of land we live in. I like to tell people that we live in a marsh. We live in a swamp. And we have some trees around, and it may not look like it, but birds tell us we live in a swamp. So all these birds that need that kind of swampy area, all the ones I put up there, birds you're going to see at any one time of the year, breeding birds in the spring and summer, and then fall birds this time of year. Right now you can see pine warblers. I heard them walking into this campus. They sing all year round. American robins are pretty common. As you get closer to if you get all the way down to the floodplain, to the creek, you'll start seeing those wading birds. So a good place to, I love that trail, by the way. I really like, because I can see all those birds, at least right now. Yeah. Now, remember, global warming could change that habitat a little bit, and we'll see what happens. Okay, other questions? Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, it seems among, in the bird watching community, there's some people who really hate cats. And I wonder if you talk about, analyze that phenomenon, and how do you feel about cats?
The last presentation I gave about that, I was asked a question. I said, well, I'll answer it. I would answer it, except that if I did, I'd get shot. So let me give you a brief answer. First of all, Kathy and I are cat lovers. I mean, big time. And we have a beautiful little tuxedo cat, black and white cat. And we just adore him. He sits beside my keyboard when I'm writing columns. But he doesn't go outside. We are totally opposed to cats roaming free outside because they are predators. You can't blame the cat. That's what they do. So house cats roaming freely are incredible danger to birds. In fact, millions and millions of birds die every year from being caught by cats. The biggest problem, though, is not free roaming house cats. They're a problem. Not the biggest problem is feral cats. These are cats that are wild cats. They really are wild cats. And they're roaming all over the place, and there are millions of those, and they are really, really hitting birds hard, which are already under pressure. I just told you, birds are under pressure. Feral cats are just damaging bird life. Now, of course, there's an organization called Alley Cats, and Alley Cats believes in feeding these feral cats, capturing them and neutering them, and then putting them back in the wild. That didn't do a lot of good. So I don't know how it's going to work out. We don't have a public will to do something about feral cats. It's interesting because if we had cougars roaming around your campus, we'd do something, wouldn't we? We have feral hogs. Feral hogs, where the system office is, we got feral hogs, and they're doing something about that. People get armadillos in their yard, and people won't do something about that. But feral cats, that's just a feral cat. That feral cat's a killer. It's not our fault. That's what they're designed to do. So I'm totally opposed. I think we should do something about getting rid of the feral cat population and teach people to keep their cats indoors. Okay, what else? Yes, Mel?
So you just mentioned the cats. What about cars?
Oh, yeah. Collision with cars? Oh, birds face numerous perils, no question about it. They hit these tall buildings that have all glass. They hit those. They run into the guy wires of these transmission towers, and yes, they have collisions with cars. Birds have a tough life, but that's not the problem. Birds can withstand many, many issues, many threats. But when you start changing their ecosystem, when you change the place where they live, or the place where they have to raise babies, then that is kind of the final straw. And that's kind of what we're doing. There's a wonderful book that you might enjoy reading called, it's published back in the 1940s, called Adventures with a Texas Naturalist, written by this guy named Roy Bedichek. Very famous book, one of my favorite books. And he was worried at the time that one of those woodpeckers I showed you called a red-headed woodpecker, he was concerned at the time, because remember he grew up in the early 20th century. He was worried that that bird was flying down to the road to get insects, and then cars were hitting it, and he was projecting that it would be wiped out. But that didn't happen. Birds are adaptable as long as their environment is stable. They can adapt as long as the environment is stable. All right, what else? Come on, you got some. You can argue with me if you want to. My wife argues with me all the time, so I'm used to it.
Well, I just want to know for all these young people here, and that includes me, but what can they do? What could they do to stop some of this? I mean, what could they practically do?
How many of you voted? Good. The best thing we can do is change public policy. That is government policy. And the only way to do that is with your vote. And the only way to do that is to speak out. We're not going to stop the warming of the earth. We've reached the tipping point. All we can do is arrest it, hopefully, at below 4 degrees centigrade. At 4 degrees centigrade, by the way, we're doomed. We already have, by the way, climate refugees. You know what climate refugees are? These are people whose lands have been inundated by salt water, or whose lands can no longer support agriculture. They are already flooding into Europe. You hear about the Syrian refugees and all this other. That's nothing compared to the climate refugees. So we collectively have to do something about government policy and have to pay attention to what government is doing and elect people that will institute change. I'm not too optimistic, by the way. What else? Yeah.
Well, I have to ask, since you mentioned Belichick, because he tells this story about a mockingbird attacking a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
And he thinks it was a plausible story. I wonder what you think about that.
Oh, yeah, mockingbirds attacking a rattlesnake. Yeah, that's not uncommon.
And pecking its eyes.
Yeah, mockingbirds are pugnacious. I mean, I told you about cats. My joke is that a cat is no match for a mockingbird. A mockingbird will really attack a cat, and with its talons, it will attack the head of a cat and even maybe poke its eyes out. Yeah, they're pretty pugnacious.
So you don't think that's just an old tale?
No, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, mockingbirds are mockingbirds like lizards, and, creepy crawly things, and so if they get a snake, sure, that's not a problem for a mockingbird. Methane gas is not something that you as humans can smell or taste or feel, so it can sneak up on you and wipe you out in an instant. So they put canaries in a cage and took them down to the coal mine. Now, birds are hypersensitive to minute changes in the environment. Little bitty changes in the environment. Birds sense it long before we do.